Balancing kick and bass. You probably know how hard it can be to do and what your song sounds like if you don't. Muddy, imbalanced and amateur. The good news is the steps we can take to achieve a good balance are relatively straightforward if you know what you're aiming for. In this video we'll check out what causes issues between kick and bass in mixing and why getting it right is so important. My name's Sam Luce here with iZotope. Join me as I share how to mix kick and bass for results that are punchy but not overpowering and will help them sit right in any mix. Let's take a look at 3 ways of getting your kick and bass to sit just right, and I want to show you a couple of cool features in Neutron that you may not be aware of. Spoiler alert, the third tip may be the most important of all and too easily overlooked. But before we deal with that, let's lay the foundations. The issues in low end really arise when the fundamental frequencies of the kick and bass aren't working together. If we have a bass note hitting, which is a D, and a kick that is also a D, then we can see here in RX when I pan the kick to the left and the bass to the right, the peaks of each waveform line up with each other. When the peaks in 2 waveforms align, they reinforce, or simply put, they get louder. The kick and bass in this example are working together and will produce that fundamental note of D louder. But when we change the note of the kick, here I've moved it up half a step to a D sharp, we can see in RX that the waveforms no longer align as perfectly. When I shift the note up another half a step to E, the peak in the bass now aligns with a trough in the kick. When 2 instruments are working against each other, as they are here, we get phase cancellation. Taking this back to basics, think of the peak as a positive, so +1, and the trough as a negative, so -1. When combined together, it's simple enough to see that 1 added to -1 equals 0, and that's what's happening. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Let's take a listen to that in action. First, I'll play you an example with the kick and bass on the same note, then I'll pitch shift the kick up a full step. You'll hear the low end changes significantly, but also that another frequency comes into play. You can see in Ozone that when the regular kick at the note of D plays, we have some low frequency energy at 110 Hz. Listen as I just band solo that 110 Hz. The first 4 are the kicks on the original D and the second 4 are on the E. When the kick is pitch shifted, it's not just the fundamental that's being affected, it's also overtones in the sound. This is of course also true for the fundamental frequency and the first harmonic. So if I band solo around the fundamental of D1 being somewhere around 36 Hz, although you may not be able to hear that low end on your speakers or headphones, a meter like Insight clearly shows us that the level drops when the pitch shifted kick is at play. And the same for the first harmonic at around 72 Hz. If your song is in the key of D, then it makes sense that you want to promote the fundamental frequencies present in that key. By having an out-of-key kick, as we've just heard, you're taking away from the fundamental frequencies present in that key through phase cancellation and detracting from the overall resonance in the music. The fundamental reason that kick and bass is so difficult to get right is really down to the physics of sound. Those low notes that we just saw in RX have frequencies that are very close together. If we think of the note C1, this has a frequency of somewhere around 33 Hz. This is too low to be reproduced on home speakers without some pretty serious subwoofer, but the next note up is C#1 and it has a frequency of around 35 Hz, just 2 Hz away. Even in the next octave, where the frequencies are double, the difference is just around 5 Hz. So notes in the low end are extremely close together, and this is where a lot of the issues lie. I'm rounding these numbers off so they're easier to deal with, but the issue still stands. With such little difference between frequencies, we need to find ways of addressing this low end. So, with the science side of things under our belts, let's move on to how we can put this into practice. To really get the most out of what's being shown in this video, you'll want to grab either a pair of headphones or sit in front of a set of speakers with decent low end extension to really hear what's going on. First of all, the key to making kick and bass sit right together is to make sure the low frequencies of each instrument aren't clashing. If we have 2 instruments occupying the same frequency spectrum, then one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to mask each other so neither can be heard clearly, or worse still, if they're out of phase, we're going to experience phase cancellation. When two signals are out of phase, one has a peak at the same time as the other has a trough. That is the phase cancellation that I mentioned earlier, and we want to avoid that at all costs. A great way of seeing whether frequencies are overlapping is with the unmasking feature in Neutron 4. To take advantage of the unmasking feature, I've added Neutron 4 to both the kick and bass tracks. Then in the drop-down menu, select the track you want to see within the display. So for the kick, I'm choosing the bass track, and vice versa. I've got a track here from producer Michael Klein. You can find a link in the description below to his music. This track has a really interesting low end. There's the kick and there's a bass line, but the bass line is kind of rhythmic and it has percussive elements to it as well. So it's all the more important that we deal with frequency masking. Let's take a listen to firstly the whole track, then just the kick and bass, and figure out which instruments we want to sit where. I've already applied some EQ boost to make the kick and bass sound just a bit bigger. When we look at Neutron with the masking engaged, wherever is the brightest orange is where the other channel is strongest. So I've made some cuts in these areas. On the kick, I boosted at around 54 Hz, so I've cut that out of the bass. And on the bass, I boosted around 77 Hz, so I've cut that out of the kick. This should leave us sounding a lot less congested in the low end. Now that we've dealt with the frequency masking issue, we're going to use sidechain compression, but maybe not quite as you know it. Typically with standard sidechain compression, we have a compressor on the bass line, which is listening to the kick. That compressor is only going to activate when the kick is present. This is done to help the bass line get out the way of the kick so it can be heard. The only problem here is that it's compressing the full bass line. Any mid or high frequency content that you have in that bass is also getting compressed, and that can lead to a kind of pumping effect that's not always what you want. So here I'm going to show you how to compress just the low end that's causing the issue, and also a nice way of visualizing what's going on. We can use a compressor module after the EQ to apply some sidechain compression, but I just want to apply this to the low end, and I'm going to show you why. First, I want to tell the bass track to listen to the kick. This is simple enough. You can tell Neutron to receive a sidechain input in any DAW. In Logic, I go to the sidechain section and select the kick as the source. From here, I then want to tell Neutron to listen to external band 1. This is relative to the bands I have set up in Neutron. It's only going to listen to this specific frequency range in the incoming sidechain signal, which means that anything in the highs or mids that may also be coming in the sidechain are largely ignored. When I do this, the purple trace on the display is the sidechain source. You can see that's the kick drum here. You can also view this in the oscilloscope, which is a nice way to overlap the source and the sidechain signals into one, so you can see where they occur at the same time and could be causing an issue. Back in the regular view, we have our frequency bands. I'm going to bring the threshold of this compressor down until I'm affecting the bass a decent amount when the kick hits to clear up some of the muddiness. I want to do this with a fairly fast release so the bass can come back quickly after it has been compressed. Let's take a listen. If I bring the mix of the compressed signal down, effectively taking the compressor out of the signal chain, you'll hear a distinct difference in the low end. When the compressor is engaged, everything gets a lot tighter. When it's taken out, there's a definite looseness to the bottom end. The reason I wanted to do this to just the low frequencies becomes apparent when I move the lower band so that it spans more of the frequency spectrum. As it starts to occupy more of the mid-range and eventually the high end, you're going to hear the whole thing start to pump and compress far too much. This is because it's compressing parts of the signal that weren't an issue in the first place, so they're best left alone. So we know how to get our kick and bass to sit nicely through EQ and sidechain compression, but that's really only part of the story. And really it's kind of the second part of the story. Any kind of processing you can apply to a source is going to be useless unless the source is right in the first place. Every mix move you make is informed by what came before it, so unless you've chosen the right sounds in the first place, mixing is going to be an arduous task. Consider this. You've chosen a bass line in C major, but the kick you've chosen is a C sharp. You can go down the EQ and sidechain compression route to get this to sit well, but whichever way you look at it, you've got a kick that simply doesn't fit in the song as well as it should. By simply selecting a different kick that fits in the key of the song, all your processing is going to become a lot easier, and the moves I showed you in steps 1 and 2 are going to have far more impact. A great way of finding out the note of your kick and where it's centered is by using Neutron 4's EQ module. I'm going to put another instance of Neutron on my kick and bypass the first so I'm not applying any boosts or cuts. Then I'm going to remove all the EQ points and leave just one node with a bell filter. Then I'm going to click the Learn button in the top right of the display. After listening, Neutron will identify where the resonant frequency of the kick is. As well as the information for the node showing you what the note is, you can also go to this button next to the soft saturation feature and select Piano Roll. This will bring up the notes of a musical keyboard at the bottom of the plugin to give you an even better insight into what note an instrument is the most resonant at. By bringing up an EQ point with a tight Q, I can hear that resonance that Neutron has identified. Having a Q this tight is always going to make frequencies ring out, but one will always be more pronounced than the others. So in this instance, it's at around 45 Hz, which Neutron is telling us is an F sharp. From here, you need to assess whether having a kick at an F sharp is a good idea or not in the context of your track. I know that the key of this track is C major, so this is maybe not the best fit, as an F sharp isn't in the key of C major. Now, this isn't a one-size-fits-all process. It may be that an out-of-key kick in the context of your track doesn't present a problem, but if you're finding yourself searching for where that issue is with the kick and bass just not locking in, this could be a good way of finding out what's wrong. From there, you can either choose a different kick, pitch your current kick up or down, and things may start to come together a lot more easily. Hopefully that's cleared up a few things for you and given you an insight into how kicks and basses work together so you can make the most of them in your next productions. As always, you can grab a copy of any of the plugins I've used in this video over at iZotope.com, and I'd love to hear if you have any tricks in getting your kick and bass to work well together in a mix, so let me know about them in the comments, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.